Benjamin Franklin famously said, "Those who would give up freedom or liberty for safety and security will receive neither and do not deserve either." The common promise of every government or symbol of authority is the promise of security. How much security it promises varies, but what it will cost you will often be severe. And there are some people who don't wish to pay that cost for security, for freedom is simply too valuable. In fact, there was a nation whose founding was built on that very premise of defying governmental control and security in favor of freedom. Perhaps it is that defiance that makes us love pirates. Pirates, the swashbuckling sailors of the high seas who defy all forms of government and authority, sacrificing their promised security and ease of living in favor of freedom, the chance to live as they see fit, even if it is for a life of crime. That's why people have begged for a pirate hero in For Honor for so long, and now that we have one, who on earth is she? Is she really based on generic pirates of the 18th century? Because she certainly doesn't look like it. There's got to be more to her, right? Well, let's talk about it. Welcome back to Heroes in History, where we analyze all the For Honor heroes and discuss who they are most likely based on and whether or not they do their counterparts justice. And today, we're finally taking a look at the pirate hero. Now, contrary to what you might be thinking, we're not going to be talking about generic pirates today because that would take way too long. We're just going to talk about who this pirate hero is based on. The pirate hero already comes into the game a bit different than what anyone expected. I can't tell you how many comments I receive from folks expressing their disappointment that the pirate isn't Blackbeard, or at least some kind of equivalent, but instead some Asian girl with a flintlock and a cutlass. However, her design, voice lines, and backstory point me to a different pirate in history than Blackbeard by far, and one that I would argue was infinitely superior to the famous Teach. I believe that the pirate hero is based on the real pirate queen of China, Ching Shih, also known as Cheng I Sao. Ching Shih's early life is a mystery, but we do know when she became a pirate. Born in 1775, Cheng grew up in Guangzhou and ended up a mere prostitute within her home city. There she had a chance encounter with the famous pirate king, Cheng I. Cheng I was no ordinary pirate. During the wars between China and Vietnam, Cheng I had been a privateer commander over a small fleet of ships and had earned the respect of his men as well as the admiration of the common people for his leadership and skills. However, when the war was over and China could no longer pay them, like most privateers faced with similar situations, Cheng I turned to a life of piracy. But under him were 300 pirate ships, his own pirate fleet of ships that controlled all of the coast of China from the Gulf of Tonkin to the Pearl River of Canton, and possibly farther. Cheng I had taken a liking to Ching Shih, not only because she was beautiful and likely good in bed, but because she was cunning and shrewd. He abducted her from her brothel and married her, making her his pirate queen. And it was a very good arrangement for him, as while he was an excellent warrior and military commander, Ching Shih was better with money and business. Having worked in a brothel her whole life, she had a silver tongue and was excellent at negotiation and ran the pirate business for her husband. The two were a fantastic team. Through their teamwork and careful planning, they controlled the rice and salt trade on the coast, and while Cheng I made them powerful, Ching Shih made them rich. But things changed 6 years later in 1807 when Cheng I was swept overboard in a typhoon and died. This left the entire fleet leaderless. Seeing opportunity knocking, Ching Shih stepped forward and offered up her name to be considered to lead the pirate fleet. Now, this would normally be the point where you might think, why would they let a woman lead? Isn't pirate leadership a man's job? But keep in mind that many of these men grew up in a coastal town or fishing village where, if a husband died and could no longer work, women would be expected to help or take over the husband's job. The idea of Ching Shih taking over for her husband was not an insane proposition. Most of the commanders of the fleet were well aware of Ching Shih's management skills and organizational capabilities. She'd make a fine leader. It also helped that the pirate fleet was almost a family-run business, and many of Cheng Yi's relatives were also high-ranking in the fleet, so they could vouch for her, especially Cheng Shih's stepson, Jing Bao, who vouched for her as the new fleet commander. It also helped that Cheng Shih and Jing Bao became romantically involved later on, so having him as her voucher and lover helped solidify her position in the pirate fleet. But Cheng Shih didn't just assume command of the fleet. She made some changes. Cheng Shih wasn't just a pretty face as a manager of finances and business for the fleet. She had intimate knowledge of all of its inner workings, its underhanded deals, and even some very questionable activities performed by the crew. She was described as ruthless, efficient, and unforgiving. She established a strict code of law that the entire fleet was to adhere to without exception. Breaking of this code would be punishable by execution, and that was no bluff. Her rule was partly run by admiration, but also by fear. But why such harsh reforms and disciplinary practices? Well, one of the large problems facing Cheng Shih was that the pirate federation that she had picked up from her husband was largely fractured. It was unorganized and unstructured. One of the large weaknesses of too much freedom and no central leadership was that it fell into anarchy quickly. She had to work fast to rebuild the structure of her pirate fleet. First, she re-established the flag fleets. When her husband had ruled the Federation, it was broken into 6 different fleets of ships, each one color-coded. The strongest fleet, and the one run by her lover Cheng I Sao, was the Red Flag Fleet. She assigned leaders to each of the fleets and ensured that those leaders would be trusted to follow her code. Speaking of which, her second action was to implement a strict pirate code of law that she enforced heavily. The code set down 3 primary rules with subclasses and sub-clauses underneath. The rules included, all pirates who disobey orders or break the laws of the code would be killed without exception. Raping, killing, or brutalizing a captive or crew member would be met with execution, and stealing from the crew or going ashore without leave would be met with execution. With her rules in place, Ching Shih sprang into action to begin making money for the Federation. First, she established a common trust for the entire Federation. One of the largest problems the pirate fleet had was the distribution of booty to the crew. So to fix this, all raids and sieges a pirate made would involve the pirates placing their captured loot into this trust. The captors of the loot gave 20% of what they took, but the other 80% went to the trust. So for example, if the Red Flag Fleet raided from a town and stole, say, $1,000 worth of material, 20% of that would go to the Red Flag Fleet, but the other 80% would go into the trust and then be divvied up to the rest of the fleet accordingly. Then the commanders would calculate the cost of the loot and divvy it to the rest of the Federation as needed. This was an easy thing to do already, as the Federation had control of the salt trade in China, but Cheng would expand that influence to control all shipping in southern China. The power and strength of her crew grew exponentially, and Cheng began orchestrating raids across the coast and rivers by attacking villages and sending a clear message: pay us for protection, or we burn down your village next. The Pirate Federation was becoming incredibly wealthy and powerful, and their numbers were growing fast. At the height of her rule, it is estimated that Ching Shih controlled somewhere around 1,500 ships and 180,000 pirates. It was the largest pirate fleet ever assembled in world history, and she commanded it for 3 whole years. But the problem with fame is that eventually you start to stand out, and to all the wrong people. You see, because they controlled all trade in southern China, that meant that they also interacted with Western ships that were trying to sell and trade. Western ships that wanted to do trade with China had trouble with the fleet constantly harassing their ships, and though the Chinese Empire tried often to stop her, the state of the Qing Dynasty Navy at the time was pitiful, and they were no match for the experienced pirate fleet. Besides, the pirates hadn't done anything bad enough yet to warrant a full military conflict, so the Qing Dynasty was kind of having their hands tied, and the Western ships just couldn't do anything to deal with the faster, more mobile ships of the pirates. This changed, though, when the Federation killed a diplomat of the royal court. Now they couldn't be ignored. The Chinese government began to take measures to stop the Pirate Federation. They began training local village militia to strengthen their ability to fight off the pirates, and also redirected much of their supply routes into tight river areas that would put a stranglehold on the Federation supply lines. Worse yet, they began asking for foreign aid from England and Portugal to help take down the pirates. In 1809, after a raid on the city of Macau, which was controlled by Portugal, the Portuguese finally lent their full support and helped the Chinese plant a trap for Ching Shih. They lured the pirates into Tongcheng Bay and tried to destroy them while trapped. After a long battle of attrition, the pirates were finally able to escape the trap through cleverness and patience. However, the trap had sent a clear message to Ching Shih and her pirates. They were running out of options, and they couldn't keep going forever. The Chinese government offered amnesty to any pirates who would willingly surrender, and almost 2 whole flag fleets did just that, crippling the overall size of Cheng's forces and leaving her realizing that her time was about up. From here, her power could only wane. But right now, at that point, she still had enough power to create leverage. In April of 1810, Ching Shih accepted the government's offer of amnesty, as long as a few conditions were met. First, she wanted pardons for all pirates under her command, as well as allowing them to keep all the loot that they had attained, and offering them any jobs that they needed, especially ones in the military. Second, she wanted a personal fleet of ships for her and her now husband, Cheng I Sao, to start their own salt trade operation. And the government was obviously hesitant to give control of ships to a former pirate queen. However, when Ching Shih offered to say, well, you can either do that or I can start raiding again, they didn't want to drag on the farce any longer, so eventually China agreed to the terms. Ching Shih retired from piracy in 1810 and went on to work with her husband in not only the salt trade, but also opening a gambling house in Canton. She lived to the ripe old age of 69, where she quietly died in her sleep in 1844. And so ends the legendary pirate queen, who commanded the largest pirate fleet in world history and was one of the few pirates to live to old age. But that still begs a few questions. Sure, she might have been good, but wouldn't Blackbeard have been a better choice? Wouldn't a pirate like Blackbeard been a much better inspiration for the hero for honor? There have been some people who have sent me comments and arguments arguing that Blackbeard would have been a much better inspiration, and I would have to disagree. I'm of the opinion that Blackbeard, while a very interesting character and with a very cool aesthetic, is probably a very overrated pirate in the grand scheme of things. The usual reasons I hear as to why Blackbeard is superior usually comes down to the following. One argument that I hear is Ching Shih only got to where she is by her merits. She didn't earn anything. She only ran her pirate fleet for 3 years. That's not much of a legacy, and she never earned it to begin with. To that I say, yes, but Blackbeard officially became a pirate in 1716 under a famous pirate captain named Benjamin Hornigold. He wouldn't become a captain himself until the next year in 1717, and he would die the very next year. That's only about a year and a half, or at most 2 years, and it was through his relation to Hornigold that he even began to gain a reputation in the first place. So, yeah, he didn't much earn his position either. He got it from his association with another pirate and only had a year to earn his reputation. Another argument I hear is Blackbeard stood defiantly against England and governmental oppressors, while Ching Shih was just a prostitute who got lucky. And to that I say, Edward Teach, or Blackbeard, was a privateer under the employment of England before he became a pirate, and only became a pirate after the wars were over and he couldn't be paid. He didn't fight an oppressive government. He fought for them until it was no longer profitable, and then he raided towns and villages like Charlestown. Another argument I hear is, Ching Shih was just a leader. She didn't actually do any real fighting. Well, we're not sure about that. We don't know enough about her history to know how much fighting she actually did. But on the topic of Blackbeard, Blackbeard was famous for abstaining from violence if he could, instead preferring to use his devilish image and reputation to make people give him what he wanted without ever having to do any fighting. Not that he couldn't fight per se, but it wasn't like he was a great warrior who rushed into battle and slayed hundreds before him. And then the big one, the one that I hear from several people, Ching Shih accepted a pardon and gave up her life of piracy. She was weak. But Blackbeard did the same thing. In August of 1718, Teach settled in Bath, North Carolina, and tried to live a simple life on a plantation after accepting a royal pardon. But he eventually gave that up and went right back to piracy in November 22nd of the same damn year. And he died in battle with British naval forces led by Lieutenant Robert Maynard. Look, I'm not saying that Blackbeard isn't an imposing or cool or even intimidating figure. He most certainly is, but I think pop culture has built him up into something he really wasn't. I blame this largely on what Assassin's Creed Black Flag did with him, making him into a character I really don't think history smiles upon. But to say Ching Shih is overrated and Blackbeard is superior is, to my way of thinking, incredibly inappropriate, especially when comparing what the two managed to accomplish. Whereas Ching Shih, while maybe only running her pirate fleet for 3 years on her own, did amazing things with it, implemented a code of conduct for all of her pirates to live by, managed to keep the Chinese government and the Western ships that came to trade at bay, managed to end her career on a high note, and successfully started a career with her loot and dying of old age. Comparing that to Blackbeard, who ran his own pirate fleet for 1 year, retired, couldn't keep it going on the retirement, tried to go back into the game, and died. No disrespect, but I think Ching Shih wins that one. The simple prostitute who rose above her station, joined a pirate federation, assumed command and transformed it into the largest and most successful pirate fleet in history, and managed to retire with all her loot, dignity, and cess intact, that is what makes Ching Shih the greatest pirate in history and the undisputed queen of pirates. So, now that history lesson is out of the way, how does she compare to the pirate hero? Well, my first clue to comparing her to Ching was the color of her ship. The red sails remind me of the reality that Ching Shih commanded the Red Flag Fleet, a fleet recognized by their red sails. But the second clue was the sudden arrival of all of her pirates on Heathmore, but no leader. Ching Shih often dispatched her other pirate fleets to attack and raid villages and towns to soften them up or encourage them to open trade or extortion from the locals. It would make sense that Ching Shih would unleash her fleet onto Heathmore, and when she isn't getting the response she wants because the Knights, Vikings, Samurai, and Wulin are holding them off, she finally has to go in personally and find out what's going on. Her speaking Cantonese makes sense as Ching Shih was from Canton herself. 水開啲！唔該晒，老友，今次你大鑊啦！ And then there's her backstory. Bao Yin is the name of the default pirate captain. And what was the name of the lover and husband of Ching Shih? Jing Bao. Bao Yin, Xingbao? I smell a comparison there. But Bao Yin supposedly grew up in Wulin territory. When her parents were killed in the Civil War, she had to strike it out on her own and eventually built up her own pirate crew. Now, in history, we're not sure what led Ching Shih into prostitution, but we can imagine her parents were probably taken out of the picture at a young age, and she likely had a very poor upbringing. The Confucian way of life in Qing Dynasty China involved most women staying out of public affairs, but Ching Shih was not shy about pushing her own plans and experience into the limelight, showing a clear desire to oppose and challenge the government and ideological standards of the country. A rebel to the core, it seems. However, she was also smart enough to recognize the need for structure as she implemented various rules and regulations to keep her federation in line, not unlike how Bao Yin seems to earn and demand the respect of her crew as well as those she confronts. You see, in a world of warriors, it's not the strength of one's arms that matter, but the strength of one's character. The man or woman who can create the greatest change and make the greatest waves are the ones who endure the harshest storms and stand strong to rebuild. But to do this, one cannot be shackled by the restraints of security, complacency, and acceptance. Instead, one must ride the waves of freedom, sailing on the winds of change, and taking the helm of ambition. You know, I reference it a lot, but in One Piece, Luffy said best what it means to be the king of the pirates.
Your foes will be powerful. Knowing that, do you still think you can rule this mighty sea?
What? I don't want to rule anything. Being king of the pirates is about being more free than anyone.
Huh?
And indeed, the pirate queen of For Honor is most certainly more free than any of the For Honor warriors. I mean, you still have to buy her. She's definitely pretty expensive. I mean, you could even call it piracy to get her. But you know what I mean. She is the undisputed pirate queen of For Honor. And as the saying goes, God save the queen.
I will be queen of the pirates!
Drop dead and give me 20. Not a good dead hot ad, did you? Diagnosis? You
Don't interrupt me!
Oh no.
You've captured Zone C.
Game was rigged from the start.
Nice hustle, tons of fun. Next time, eat a salad.
You cannot burn me! I do not have time to combust!
Your team is breaking.
You're supposed to be dead! I'm a little busy at the moment!
Your team rallied. Enemy team.
You cheated. Pirate.